Hook. In a world where every royal gesture is scrutinized and analyzed, sometimes the most powerful moments happen when two people forget about the cameras, the protocols, and the watching world, and simply remember they are human beings who deeply love each other. The morning mist clung to the ancient stones of Edinburgh Castle like a gentle embrace, wrapping the fortress in an ethereal shroud that seemed to blur the lines between past and present. Catherine adjusted the collar of her deep emerald coat, the color chosen deliberately to honor their Scottish hosts, while William stood beside her reviewing the day's itinerary with their private secretary. The autumn air carried the scent of heather and the distant sound of bagpipes practicing somewhere within the castle grounds.
This wasn't just another royal engagement for Catherine and William. Scotland held a special place in their hearts, not just as future monarchs, but as a couple whose love story had deep roots in this rugged, beautiful country.
It was at the University of St. Andrews where they first met, where their friendship bloomed into something deeper, and where they learned to navigate the complexities of a relationship under the watchful eyes of the world.
Catherine remembered those university days vividly as she gazed out over the Scottish landscape, the nervous excitement of their first shared classes, the awkward encounters in the library, and the slow realization that the tall, sandy-haired young man she knew as William Wales was someone truly special. Back then, she never could have imagined that those tentative conversations about art history and shared laughs over cafeteria meals would lead to standing here, preparing to represent the crown in the country where their love story began. William caught her distant expression and smiled softly. Even after all these years of marriage, he could still read her thoughts with remarkable accuracy.
He knew she was thinking about their past, about the journey that had brought them to this moment. Their relationship had weathered storms that would have destroyed most couples. The intense media scrutiny, the pressure of royal expectations, the temporary breakup that had taught them both how much they truly meant to each other.
The castle staff bustled around them with quiet efficiency, making final preparations for the day's events. Catherine would be visiting a local children's hospital in the afternoon, while William would be meeting with Scottish business leaders to discuss environmental initiatives. But first, they would tour the castle together, meeting with historians and local dignitaries who had been eagerly anticipating this visit for months. As they began their walk through the castle's ancient corridors, Catherine was struck by the weight of history surrounding them. These stone walls had witnessed centuries of Scottish history, battles fought, alliances forged, and countless human dramas played out within their confines. She thought about all the couples who had walked these same paths before them, facing their own challenges and celebrating their own victories.
Their guide, Dr. Margaret MacLeod, was a distinguished historian in her 70s who had spent decades studying the castle's history.
Her eyes lit up as she began sharing stories about the fortress, her passion for her subject evident in every word. She spoke of Mary Queen of Scots, who had once lived within these walls, and of the countless battles that had shaped Scotland's destiny. William found himself particularly interested in the military history, asking detailed questions about the castle's strategic importance and the evolution of its defenses over the centuries. Catherine was drawn to the more personal stories, tales of the people who had lived and loved within the castle walls, the everyday human experiences that transcended royal titles and historical significance. As they moved through the Great Hall, Dr. MacLeod pointed out the intricate details of the architecture, explaining how each element told a story about the period in which it was built. The morning light streaming through the ancient windows cast dancing patterns on the stone floors, creating an almost magical atmosphere that seemed to transport them back in time. Catherine noticed a young girl in the small group of local school children who had been invited to meet them. The child, perhaps 8 or 9 years old, was staring at Catherine with wide eyes, clearly starstruck. Catherine knelt down to the girl's level, her natural warmth immediately putting the child at ease. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Catherine asked gently, her voice carrying the kind of maternal warmth that had made her so beloved by the public. "Emma," the girl whispered, suddenly shy in the presence of royalty. "That's a beautiful name, Emma. Are you enjoying learning about the castle today?" The girl nodded enthusiastically, her initial shyness beginning to fade. "My gran says you're a real princess, like in the fairy tales." Catherine laughed softly, the sound echoing off the ancient stone walls.
"Well, I suppose I am a bit like a princess, but I'm also just a mom who loves learning about history just like you're doing today."
William watched this interaction with a familiar sense of pride and admiration. Catherine's ability to connect with people, especially children, was one of the qualities he had fallen in love with all those years ago at university. She had a gift for making everyone feel seen and valued, whether they were world leaders or excited schoolchildren. The tour continued through various chambers and battlements, each room revealing new layers of Scottish history and culture. In the crown room, they viewed the ancient honors of Scotland, the crown, scepter, and sword of state that represented centuries of Scottish sovereignty. The weight of tradition and responsibility was palpable in the air, reminding both Catherine and William of their own roles as future guardians of these ancient institutions. As they stepped onto the castle's ramparts, the full panorama of Edinburgh spread out before them. The city stretched from the medieval Old Town to the elegant Georgian New Town, with the Forth estuary glittering in the distance. The view was breathtaking, offering a perfect vantage point to appreciate the beauty and complexity of Scotland's capital city. The wind picked up slightly, causing Catherine to pull her coat closer around her. William instinctively stepped closer, offering her the shelter of his presence without even thinking about it. Was a small gesture, the kind of unconscious care that spoke to the deep bond between them, but it didn't go unnoticed by the small group of photographers who had been permitted to document parts of their visit. Dr. MacLeod continued her commentary, pointing out various landmarks visible from their elevated position. She spoke about the city's literary heritage, mentioning the writers and poets who had found inspiration in these ancient streets. Catherine was particularly intrigued by the stories of the women who had shaped Edinburgh's cultural landscape, often working behind the scenes to preserve and promote Scottish arts and literature. The morning progressed with visits to the castle's military museum and the memorial to Scottish regiments. William, with his own military background, was deeply moved by the displays honoring Scottish servicemen and women who had made the ultimate sacrifice for their country. He spent considerable time speaking with elderly veterans who had been invited to meet them, listening intently to their stories and experiences. Catherine was touched by watching her husband in these moments. His genuine respect for military service and his ability to connect with veterans from all walks of life was something she had always admired about him. These weren't photo opportunities or obligation visits for William. They were meaningful encounters with people whose service and sacrifice he truly valued. As the morning tour concluded, they found themselves in the castle's ancient chapel, a small, intimate space that had provided spiritual solace for countless generations. The silence was profound, broken only by the soft whisper of wind through the stone windows. In this sacred space, surrounded by centuries of prayer and contemplation, Catherine and William shared a quiet moment together. They stood side by side, not speaking, simply absorbing the peace and history of the place. Catherine thought about all the couples throughout history who had found strength in each other during difficult times, and she felt grateful for the steady presence of the man beside her. Their journey together hadn't always been easy, but moments like these reminded her of why they had chosen to face life's challenges together. William was thinking similar thoughts, reflecting on how far they had come since their university days in St. Andrews. The young man, who had been somewhat overwhelmed by the weight of his future responsibilities, had grown into someone who understood the privilege and duty of service. And through it all, Catherine had been his anchor, his source of strength and normalcy in a life that was anything but ordinary. The chapel visit marked the end of their joint morning activities. Soon, they would part ways for their individual afternoon engagements, but this shared exploration of Scottish history had been the perfect way to begin their visit. As they prepared to leave the castle, they thanked Dr. Tamel, MacLeod, and the castle staff for their hospitality and expertise. Walking back through the castle courtyard, Catherine and William were both quiet, each lost in their own thoughts about the morning's experiences. The history they had absorbed, the people they had met, and the connection they had felt to Scotland's rich heritage had set the tone for what they both sensed would be a meaningful and memorable visit. The afternoon sun was beginning to break through the morning's cloud cover, promising clearer skies ahead. As they approached their waiting car, Catherine turned back for one last look at the ancient fortress that had given them such a perfect start to their Scottish journey. She had no idea that the most touching moment of their entire visit was still to come, waiting for them in the rolling hills and windswept landscapes that lay ahead. The afternoon brought a complete change of scenery as Catherine made her way to the Royal Hospital for Children in Glasgow, while William attended his environmental summit in Edinburgh. The separation was temporary, but both carried with them the peaceful morning they had shared at the castle, and the anticipation of reuniting later for the evening's events in the Scottish Highlands. Catherine's visit to the Children's Hospital was deeply personal for her. As a mother of three, she understood the fears and hopes that filled these corridors, where families face some of life's greatest challenges with remarkable courage. The hospital staff had been preparing for weeks, not just for the security and protocol requirements of a royal visit, but to ensure that the children and families would have the most meaningful experience possible. Sarah Henderson, the hospital's chief pediatrician, greeted Catherine warmly as she arrived. The doctor had worked at the hospital for over 20 years and had seen countless children fight battles that would challenge the strongest adults.
She spoke about the transformative power of hope and community support in the healing process, themes that resonated deeply with Catherine's own charitable work. The first ward Catherine visited specialized in treating children with serious heart conditions. The medical technology was impressive, but what struck her most was the artwork covering the walls. Colorful paintings and drawings created by young patients during their recovery. Each piece told a story of resilience, creativity flourishing even in the most challenging circumstances. 8-year-old Jamie McPherson was one of the patients Catherine spent time with. He had been born with a complex heart condition that had required multiple surgeries throughout his young life. Despite everything he had endured, his smile was radiant as Catherine sat beside his bed, genuinely interested in hearing about his favorite books and his dreams of becoming a marine biologist when he grew up. "I want to study whales," Jamie told her enthusiastically, his eyes bright with determination. "Did you know that blue whale hearts are so big that a small child could crawl through the arteries?" Catherine was charmed by his knowledge and passion.
"That's incredible, Jamie."
"It sounds like you're going to make wonderful discoveries about ocean life someday." Jamie's mother, sitting quietly beside the bed, watched this interaction with tears in her eyes. Later, she would tell Catherine that this conversation had given her son something precious, the feeling that his dreams were not only possible but important. The way Catherine had listened to him, really listened, had made him feel like his aspirations mattered. In the cancer ward, Catherine met teenage patients who were facing their diagnoses with remarkable maturity and grace. 15-year-old Megan Campbell was undergoing treatment for leukemia, but she had organized an art therapy program for younger patients, helping them express their feelings through creative activities. Her selflessness and leadership impressed Catherine deeply. "I realized that when you're going through something difficult, helping others can actually help you too," Megan explained as she showed Catherine some of the artwork created in her program. "The little ones teach me about courage every day." Catherine spent considerable time learning about Megan's program, understanding how peer support among patients created a unique form of healing that complemented the medical treatment. She made mental notes about how similar initiatives might be supported and expanded through her charitable foundation. The hospital visit concluded with Catherine meeting families in the Family Support Center, a quiet space where parents could find respite and connection with others facing similar challenges. She listened to stories of diagnosis, treatment, setbacks, and victories. Each family's journey was unique, but the common threads of love, determination, and hope wove through every conversation. Meanwhile, in Edinburgh, William was engaged in intensive discussions about Scotland's role in global environmental conservation. The summit brought together business leaders, scientists, and policymakers to explore innovative approaches to sustainability and climate action. William's passion for environmental issues had grown stronger over the years, influenced by his father's early advocacy and his own understanding of the urgency of climate challenges. The conversations were technical and detailed, covering everything from renewable energy infrastructure to marine conservation initiatives along Scotland's extensive coastline. William found himself particularly engaged in discussions about how traditional Scottish industries could evolve to embrace sustainable practices while preserving jobs and community stability. Professor Douglas Reid, a marine biologist from the University of Edinburgh, presented research on the health of Scotland's coastal ecosystems. His work revealed both concerning trends and encouraging signs of recovery in areas where conservation measures had been implemented. The declaration follows on fishing paths to towing. William asked detailed questions about the research methodology and potential applications for conservation efforts in other parts of the United Kingdom. "Your Royal Highness," Professor Reid explained, "the Scottish Highlands represent one of Europe's last great wilderness areas, but they're also incredibly vulnerable to climate change. The delicate balance of these ecosystems requires both local community involvement and broader policy support."
This comment sparked a longer discussion about the role of local communities in environmental conservation.
William shared his belief that sustainable environmental policies must consider the needs and perspectives of people whose lives and livelihoods were directly connected to these landscapes. The conversation reinforced his excitement about the evening's event, which would take them into the heart of the Scottish Highlands. The afternoon sessions included presentations from young Scottish entrepreneurs who were developing innovative solutions to environmental challenges. Their energy and creativity reminded William of the young people Catherine was meeting at the hospital, facing significant challenges with determination, innovation, and an unshakable belief in their ability to make a positive difference. As the summit concluded, William felt energized by the discussions and the commitment he had witnessed from Scotland's environmental community. The initiatives being developed here could serve as models for conservation efforts throughout the United Kingdom and beyond. He was eager to share these insights with Catherine and to explore how their joint charitable work might support some of these emerging projects.
The drive from Edinburgh to the Scottish Highlands was spectacular, taking them through landscapes that seemed unchanged by centuries. Rolling hills covered in heather stretched to the horizon, dotted with ancient stone circles and traditional Scottish villages. The late afternoon light cast everything in golden hues, creating a scene of almost magical beauty. Catherine and William reunited at a small country inn where they would spend the night before their final day of engagements. The inn, dating back to the 18th century, had been carefully chosen for its historical significance and its commitment to supporting local Scottish communities. The owners, Mary and Robert Stewart, had operated the inn for 3 decades, welcoming travelers while preserving traditional Scottish hospitality. The inn's dining room featured locally sourced ingredients and traditional Scottish recipes passed down through generations. As Catherine and William shared a quiet dinner, they exchanged stories from their afternoon experiences. Catherine spoke movingly about the children and families she had met, their courage and resilience in facing medical challenges. William shared his excitement about the environmental initiatives and the passionate commitment he had witnessed from Scotland's conservation community. It's remarkable, Catherine reflected, how much strength people find in the most difficult circumstances. Those children and their families are teaching me about courage every day. William nodded, understanding completely. The people I met today are tackling global challenges with such innovation and determination. There's something about Scotland that seems to bring out the best in people. Maybe it's the landscape, or the history, or just the spirit of this place. They talked long into the evening about their shared work and their hopes for the future. These conversations had always been an important part of their relationship, the way they processed their experiences and supported each other's growth and development. Tonight, surrounded by the peace and beauty of the Scottish Highlands, their discussion felt particularly meaningful. The next morning dawned clear and bright, with crisp Highland air and spectacular views of the surrounding mountains. They were scheduled to visit a traditional Scottish Highland estate that had been in the same family for over 400 years, now operating as a conservation project that balanced historical preservation with modern environmental stewardship. Lord and Lady MacLeod, the estate's current caretakers, greeted them warmly as they arrived. The estate covered thousands of acres of Highland landscape, including ancient forests, moorlands, and several pristine lochs. The MacLeod family had worked for generations to preserve this landscape while adapting their practices to support both wildlife conservation and sustainable land management. The morning tour took them through ancient oak forests where red deer moved quietly through the undergrowth and golden eagles soared overhead. Lady MacLeod, a trained naturalist, explained the complex relationships between different species and the careful management required to maintain the ecosystem's delicate balance. This landscape may look wild and untouched, she explained, but it's actually the result of centuries of careful stewardship. Each generation of our family has had to adapt to new challenges while preserving what's most essential about this place. Catherine was fascinated by the estate's approach to conservation education, particularly their programs for local school children. Students from nearby villages regularly visited the estate to learn about Highland ecology and traditional land management practices. The program helped young people understand their connection to the landscape and their role in its preservation. William was particularly interested in the estate's renewable energy initiatives. Solar panels discreetly positioned on estate buildings and small wind turbines designed to blend with the landscape generated clean energy while maintaining the area's historical character. The MacLeods had proven that environmental responsibility and historical preservation could work together rather than compete with each other. As the morning progressed, they walked along the shores of a pristine Highland loch, its waters reflecting the surrounding mountains like a perfect mirror. The silence was profound, broken only by the occasional call of a loon or the gentle lapping of water against the rocky shore. In this setting, surrounded by centuries of preserved natural beauty, both Catherine and William felt a deep sense of peace and connection to the landscape. The stage was set for something special, though neither of them could have predicted the moment that was about to unfold, a spontaneous expression of their enduring love that would be captured forever and touch the hearts of people around the world. The afternoon sun was beginning to cast longer shadows across the Highland landscape as Catherine and William prepared for their final engagement of the Scottish visit. They were scheduled to attend a traditional Highland gathering, where local communities would demonstrate Scottish cultural traditions and celebrate their heritage. The event was being held in a natural amphitheater formed by rolling hills, with the dramatic backdrop of ancient mountains rising in the distance. As their car wound through the narrow Highland roads, Catherine gazed out at the breathtaking scenery. The landscape seemed to change with every curve, revealing new vistas of lochs, forests, and moorlands painted in the rich colors of autumn. She had always loved Scotland, but this visit had deepened her appreciation for both its natural beauty and the resilience of its people. The gathering was already in full swing when they arrived. The air was filled with the stirring sound of bagpipes and the rhythmic beating of traditional drums. Dancers in colorful tartan costumes moved through intricate Highland dances, their movements telling stories passed down through generations. Local artisans displayed their crafts, hand-woven textiles, traditional pottery, and intricate metalwork that represented centuries of Scottish artistic tradition. William was immediately drawn into conversation with members of several Highland clans who had traveled from across Scotland to participate in the gathering. Each clan chief wore their traditional dress with obvious pride, representing families whose histories stretched back through centuries of Scottish heritage. The stories they shared were fascinating tales of resilience, adaptation, and unwavering connection to their Highland home. Catherine found herself captivated by a group of elderly women who were demonstrating traditional Scottish weaving techniques. Their hands moved with the practiced ease of decades, creating patterns that had been passed down through generations of Highland families. The lead weaver, Mrs.
Flora Mackenzie, had learned these techniques from her grandmother, who had taught her not just the practical skills but the stories and songs that were woven into every piece. Each pattern tells a story, Mrs.
Mackenzie explained, her weathered hands never pausing in their work. This one represents the mountains that surround our village, and this represents the rivers that flow through our valley. When we weave, we're not just making cloth, we're preserving our history. Catherine was deeply moved by this connection between craft and culture. She thought about her own children and the importance of helping them understand their own heritage and responsibilities. Watching these women preserve traditions through their daily work reminded her of the many ways people maintain connections to their past while adapting to an ever-changing world.
The gathering included demonstrations of traditional Highland games, with competitors testing their strength and skill in events that had been part of Scottish culture for centuries. William tried his hand at some of the less demanding competitions, much to the delight of the gathered crowd.
His genuine enthusiasm and willingness to participate, despite the obvious challenges of doing so under the watchful eyes of photographers, endeared him to everyone present. As the afternoon progressed, Catherine and William moved through the gathering together, sometimes separating to engage with different groups, but always maintaining an awareness of each other's presence. They had developed this rhythm over years of public appearances, supporting each other's individual interests while sharing the overall experience. The music was particularly powerful. A group of traditional Scottish musicians had gathered to perform songs that had been part of Highland culture for generations. Some were lively dance tunes that had people clapping and moving to the rhythm, while others were hauntingly beautiful ballads that spoke of love, loss, and the enduring connection between the Scottish people and their landscape. One song in particular seemed to capture the essence of the afternoon. It was an ancient Gaelic love song performed by a young woman whose voice carried across the natural amphitheater with remarkable clarity and emotion. The melody was both mournful and hopeful, speaking of love that endures through separation, hardship, and the passage of time.
As the singer's voice rose and fell with the haunting melody, Catherine found herself thinking about her own love story with William. The song seemed to capture something essential about enduring love, not just the passion and excitement of new romance, but the deeper commitment that develops over years of shared experiences, challenges overcome together, and mutual support through life's inevitable difficulties.
William, standing nearby while speaking with a group of Highland historians, heard the music and glanced toward Catherine. Something in her expression as she listened to the song touched him deeply. In that moment, she looked both completely present in the Highland gathering and lost in private thoughts that he could only guess at. The combination of her obvious engagement with the people around her and her subtle emotional response to the music reminded him powerfully of why he had fallen in love with her all those years ago.
The song concluded to enthusiastic applause, and the gathering's formal program began to wind down. However, the musicians continued playing more quietly, and many of the visitors lingered to enjoy the beautiful evening and the sense of community that had developed throughout the afternoon.
As the sun began to set behind the Highland Mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange, pink, and purple, the gathering took on an almost magical quality. The golden light transformed the landscape into something that seemed almost too beautiful to be real, while the continuing music and quiet conversations created an atmosphere of peace and contentment.
Catherine and William had completed their official duties for the day, but neither felt ready to leave. There was something about this place and this moment that seemed too precious to rush. They stood together at the edge of the gathering, taking in the scene and reflecting on the richness of their Scottish experience. It was then,
In this perfect Highland setting, with the mountains glowing in the sunset light, and the gentle sound of traditional music drifting across the landscape, that the moment occurred which would later be remembered as one of the most touching displays of their enduring love.
William had been speaking quietly with their private secretary about the travel arrangements for the following day when he looked up to see Catherine standing alone, silhouetted against the dramatic Highland sky. She had wandered a few steps away from the main gathering, drawn by the spectacular view and perhaps seeking a moment of quiet reflection after the intensity of their busy schedule.
Something about seeing her there, so clearly moved by the beauty around them and lost in contemplation, struck him with unexpected force. In that instant, she wasn't the Duchess of Cambridge with all the responsibilities and public attention that role entailed.
She was simply Catherine, the woman he had fallen in love with at university, the mother of their children, his closest friend and most trusted advisor, the person who had chosen to share the unique challenges and privileges of his life. Without conscious thought, William walked toward her, drawn by an impulse that had nothing to do with royal protocol or public appearances. As he approached, Catherine turned toward him with a smile that seemed to capture all the joy and contentment of their Scottish visit. The love and understanding that passed between them in that glance was visible to anyone who happened to be watching.
What happened next was completely spontaneous and utterly natural. William reached out and drew Catherine into his arms, holding her close in an embrace that spoke of deep affection, mutual support, and enduring love.
For a long moment, they simply stood together, taking in the beauty around them and the warmth of each other's presence. The embrace itself might have passed unnoticed. Couples share such moments all the time.
But this was different. There was something in the quality of their connection, the obvious depth of their affection, and the natural way they fit together that was deeply moving to witness.
This wasn't a staged photo opportunity or a calculated public gesture. It was a genuine moment of intimacy shared by two people who clearly treasured each other.
Several photographers captured the moment, and the images would later be shared around the world. But what made the photographs so compelling wasn't just the romantic setting or the natural beauty of the Highland landscape.
Was the authentic emotion visible in both Catherine and William, the obvious love, respect, and deep partnership that characterized their relationship. Standing nearby, Lord MacLeod watched the couple with a knowing smile. As someone who had been married to Lady MacLeod for over 40 years, he recognized the quality of connection he was witnessing. "That's a couple who've learned to treasure each other," he murmured to his wife, who nodded in agreement.
The embrace lasted only a few moments, but its impact was profound. When Catherine and William finally separated, both were smiling with a warmth and contentment that seemed to radiate outward, affecting everyone around them.
The gathering had already been a celebration of Scottish culture and community, but this spontaneous display of genuine affection added something special, a reminder of the enduring power of love to create moments of perfect happiness, even in the midst of demanding public lives. As the evening continued, Catherine and William remained close together, their earlier embrace having created a mood of relaxed intimacy that characterized the rest of their time at the gathering.
They moved through their final conversations with visitors and participants with obvious contentment. Their earlier moment of connection having reminded them both of what was most important in their lives. The Highland gathering concluded with a traditional blessing offered by the local minister, asking for protection and prosperity for all who called Scotland home.
As the blessing was spoken, Catherine and William stood hand in hand, their connection to each other and to the Scottish landscape clearly visible to everyone present. The drive back to their accommodation was quiet and peaceful. Both Catherine and William were lost in their own thoughts about the richness of their Scottish experience and the unexpected gift of that moment together against the backdrop of the Highland sunset. They had completed another successful royal engagement, but more importantly, they had been reminded of the love and partnership that sustained them through all of their public responsibilities. Later, as they prepared for bed in their Highland inn, they reflected on the day's experiences and the deeper significance of their Scottish visit. This trip had reinforced their connection not just to Scotland and its people, but to each other and to the values that guided their work together.
The photographs of their tender embrace would indeed travel around the world, touching hearts and reminding people of the enduring power of authentic love.
But for Catherine and William themselves, the most important aspect of that moment had been the private reminder it provided of their own journey together and the strength they continued to draw from their partnership. Their Scottish visit had been a success by any measure. Meaningful connections made with Scottish communities, important charitable and environmental work advanced, and cultural traditions celebrated and honored. But the heart-melting moment they had shared in the Highland evening light had transformed their trip into something even more significant, a public affirmation of enduring love and a private reminder of the precious relationship at the center of their very public lives. As they drifted off to sleep in the peaceful Highland Inn, both Catherine and William carried with them the warmth of their afternoon together, and the knowledge that, whatever challenges lay ahead, they would continue to face them together with the same love and partnership that had sustained them through all the years of their remarkable journey.